Hey, how's it going, guys and girls? We're here off the stage again. Tonight we're here with Mr. Rob Thorne. Cheers for coming along, mate.
Kia ora.
Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you do. What is Taonga pūoro, for those who don't already know?
Well, Taonga pūoro basically as a term represents what we've come to know as traditional Māori musical instruments. Taonga meaning an object or an object of special value, and pūoro having a sound reference. So yeah, Taonga pūoro basically is the term that we use for what is being used today and considered to be traditional Māori musical instruments.
Cool. So what were the traditional uses for the Taonga pūoro in traditional Māori culture?
I think traditional uses were very varied, and there is also a great deal that is still as yet is uncovered in terms of how they were used or why they were used. So we're talking about function. There's a certain amount of conjecture when we're dealing with what I would call a broken tradition. So a tradition that has lost part of its stream or its flow when it comes to history. So there is a point there in its history where they were stopped being used, and in that period where they were no longer being used and were in fact for a period outlawed, that those important things were covered over. I think there's an important thing that needs to be understood with Indigenous understanding globally, is that nothing is lost. So we can talk about lost knowledge, or that this understanding has been lost, and I think that lost is an inappropriate word. There were certain things that were covered over by people in an attempt to protect the power or the sacredness of those particular objects and their uses, and as yet those things haven't been uncovered. There were some flutes that were specifically known to be used to court potential wives and husbands, and so those flutes were known maybe as love flutes, and there's a number of really well-known stories around Aotearoa in regards to particular flutes being used in that way, and then there were some that were used in a very sacred or secretive manner, and were used only by particular specialists for maybe gaining direct contact with the atua or the gods. So they were as wide and as varied as musical instruments of today. I think one of the references that I like to constantly draw attention to is this idea within Western culture about how the flute is a magical instrument. We have a number of famous musical pieces that actually based around the idea of a magic flute. And so I think that the idea of magic in wind and flutes isn't necessarily just particularly a Māori thing or an Indigenous thing, it's something that seems to be all pervasive across the planet in terms of flutes having some kind of a magical reference. There were other instruments that I have been told stories in regards to maybe some of these instruments being used in healing, and other instruments that were used particularly on an awareness level, on a public platform to call people to attention, to bring people together, to keep people awake, and so on, you know.
And what does each kind of instrument represent?
The representation of the instruments is all about the voice and the material or the element or the resource that they've been made from. So I play a bone flute made from the wing bone of an albatross, and to me that represents, the voice of that is the voice of the sky, the voice of that particular bird, and coincidentally, though I don't think it is an accident, those voices are very high and are similar to the sounds of those birds. When I play stones, struck with stones, there's a representation there of Papatuanuku and the earth, even Ruaumoko, who is the goddess of earthquakes. When I'm using wood, it's often the voice of Tane and the forest. When we're talking about, say, the putatara, which is a conch shell with a wooden mouthpiece, we're talking about a marrying there of voices between the land and the sea. So the representation is about intention and also the implied resource that has been used.
Yeah, so how long have you been using Taonga pūoro?
I've been basically working with Taonga pūoro for the last over 10 years now, in a research capacity, and in a making capacity, and in a playing capacity. I first came to Taonga pūoro and came to understand it through a friend who could not play a particular flute, the kōauau, that she had made in a workshop. And she asked if I could get a noise from it. As a Māori, I'd never actually ever seen this. This was at the end of the 90s, and I grew up in an education system that didn't incorporate this kind of thing. As a noise musician, I took this hollow tube and I played it like a trumpet, which was incidentally the first instrument I learnt when I was 10 years old. So with that, she said, great, that's the only noise I've heard that's ever come out of that, you can have that. So I took that flute and I started to explore how it may have supposed to have been played, and ended up taking myself off into particular gardens around Massey where I was completing my undergraduate study, and found myself learning to play it by applying various noise philosophies and ethic to something that I didn't know how to play, and soon enough learned how to play what I now know as the oblique, or the transversal, the cross-blown flute embouchure. Yep. And that's how I kind of became involved. It was at an academic level, though it kind of started with this idea that here was an instrument that I couldn't play, and I wasn't going to allow that.
Can understand that.
Yeah. So then I found myself in a situation where the research became, I guess the saying is, bigger than both of us. It became bigger than me, and soon enough the research was directing me in ways that I'd never imagined, and soon enough I found myself on a journey around Aotearoa in the back rooms of various museums, looking at ancient and not so ancient musical instruments, and learning about how particular traditional ways that they were made.
So when did you do your first public performance?
I guess the first time that I ever stood up to play kōauau, and particularly pakuru, which is a tapping instrument, was at Te Manawa Museum when I went to see Richard Nunn speak, and I was working at the time with a very good friend and very knowledgeable tohunga, Warren Warbrick, and they asked me to get up and play a tune with them.
Cool.
Yeah.
So have you noticed a revival of these instruments lately within contemporary music? Absolutely.
It's filtering through in a way that I don't think you can switch on the TV nowadays without actually hearing it. The kōauau or the pongaiuhu, or the tumu tika 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 tika, tapping through various ads, especially if you're watching Māori Channel. So there it was, all over the Rugby World Cup, and you know, when it comes to contemporary Māori composers and performers, they are incorporating it in many different and wonderful ways.
So you seem to have quite a realm of different talents as a musician. Are you in any other projects?
Yeah, I guess I've been making music, well, besides all my life, starting with singing on the back of my mum's bike while we rode around town. I first started with a musical instrument. I started playing the trumpet at 10 because all my brothers and sisters played piano, and I said, nope, I want to play drums. And Mum and Dad said, no, you're not going to play drums. So I chose the trumpet, and then I went on to play guitar, and when I first came to Palmerston North, there was a very heavy improv scene working here, or noise scene, that was basically kind of the heartbeat that started the stomach. And so I've worked in a number of loud and grisly rock bands and alternative rock bands, guitar bands, free noise bands, and currently I'm singing for a band called Neck Stretchers, which is a hard rock outfit from Palmerston North, and I play guitar and sing in a band with my wife and a good friend called Black Pudding.
Well, thanks for coming along, mate.
Kia ora.
Sweet, pleasure having you here.
And thanks for having me.
No worries, mate, no worries. That's it, we got to go get off the stage now. See you guys next month.